I've made it no real secret that I've really enjoyed Marvel Rivals, especially in the landscape of the way things have been with superheroes. There are some changes they've obviously made to characters, but in general, I feel like it maintains the spirit of the comic books. I feel like, in general, Marvel Rivals does a good job of celebrating these characters, making them fun to play as, giving you a colorful and vibrant game to engage with that is actually free if you decide not to partake in any of the monetary aspects of it. And just in general, it's good. You know, like the lore is fun, it's interesting. And so, this is something that has welcomed millions of players at this point. It's obviously working. It might not be for you, it might not be for Bob down the street, but the game is working. It's catching on, and it's getting people into these characters. It's getting people who were comic book fans who became disenfranchised to come back. It's getting people who were never interested in these characters interested in them. It's getting mainstream fans who were only into the MCU or something like that to actually see a different version of characters and see new ones. And my long point here for an intro is that I find it funny that we can acknowledge these things. I mean, even someone who doesn't like the game can acknowledge these things, that it's very clearly working for people. But for some reason, Marvel Comics doesn't understand this. Now, here's the thing. I am kind of an amateur writer. I was published in college, and I've been working on some novels that I would like to put out at some point. I'm not saying by any means I'm a super big professional, but I do have a writing degree. For me, when I'm looking at the writing of a lot of comic books, a lot of it nowadays is sloppy. A lot of it nowadays frustrates people and has really pushed people away. Not just because it's not what they want to see, but also just because it's bad. Not everything, but a lot of things. And we've talked ad nauseum before about Spider-Man comics. Now, what's funny is, with this writing background, I eventually thought about, who knows if it'll happen, writing for a company like this. Now, I don't know if they would never let me, because I've criticized their executive branch. I'm sure by the time I got into it, it would be someone else. But a lot of this is coming from Tom Brevoort, or Brevoort, however you say his name, who is essentially one of the heads at Marvel Comics nowadays, executive editor. And he basically talked about Marvel Rivals, and I would argue kind of was dismissive about it and why it was popular and why it was catching on. Now, popular doesn't mean good. It doesn't always mean good. There's a lot of things that are popular that are probably not good. But when it comes to comic books, I think the thing to take away from it is that a lot of comic books nowadays are not popular, or not nearly as popular as they used to be. People have fallen out of love with the comic book industry and with a lot of the creators for it, especially now that they're on social media and you can see everything they say, and a lot of them get harassed by fans or they harass fans back, and essentially it leads to this toxic atmosphere where people don't enjoy a lot of modern comics. They don't like a lot of modern comic book authors. And then you have executive editors like Tom Brevoort out here who say a lot of different things about comics that people disagree with, but are in a position of power. So his word matters, and the thousands or millions of people who disagree, it doesn't matter because he's in a position of power with it and we're not. So when I'm looking at this, it's very frustrating to see him be so dismissive of this, which we'll get into some of his quotes here. But in general, I'm just left scratching my head wondering why Marvel Comics can't see what's working right now and adapt to it. So I have a question today for you, which is, in general, what are your thoughts on this situation as we take a look at his discussion, which was in a Q&A blog entry. I know we kind of have to dig here, but it is still interesting to me. And I saw this originally reported by Bounding Into Comics, but it has been reported by other outlets and people as well. In general, I think it's interesting, though, to see his comments. If you enjoy this video, you want to leave a like, subscribe, I appreciate that very much. We are going to have more products up on CosmoBunny.shop where we make coasters, keychains, trays, and more out of recycled comic book paper. We don't print images, we make them out of recycled stuff, so I'll have more info on that at the end, but that's a way you can support the channel if you're interested. Now, in this Q&A portion, of the Man with a Hat Substack blog, which I'm sure a lot of people did not read, but I am here to read for you. He was essentially asked about different things like, can we expect or anticipate for, Cloak and Dagger to do anything in the next year? And basically saying, in terms of fan opinion, it feels like they've never been more popular than they are right now thanks to Marvel Rivals. Brevoort answered this, and looking at these characters said, I tell you, I tend to think that popularity in Marvel Rivals has more to do with gameplay mechanics than it does with the characters themselves. Now, before I get even further here, what's funny to me is tell that to the Rule 34 artists, okay? Tell that to my homework folder that is full of Squirrel Girl, all right? Or is full of Sue Storm. These characters are definitely rising in popularity, and people aren't looking at stuff like that because of gameplay mechanics. They're not looking up how to play Sue Storm, they're looking up how voluptuous is Sue Storm, okay? Now, that's horny posting, but I'm just saying that's an example right there, and you can actually see that with Google Trends and different data, that these characters have risen a lot in terms of search history. Actually, even the developers of Marvel Rivals mentioned something like Susan Storm's searches rose like 200 to 400%, I believe, when they released her into the game on Google. People are looking it up. People are interested in the character. Now, for what reason? Up to you to say. I know what reason a lot of us might be, cultured people, but a lot of people also just love the character as a character. And so Brevoort went on with this statement I really disagree with, saying, which is to say that I haven't seen any major correlation between popularity in the game and a rise of interest in the character in print, outside of maybe one or two outliers. Then going on to say, that said, we are planning to do something with Cloak and Dagger in the near future, so that potential audience will have something to take a look at. What's funny to me, though, about this is when comic book movies, and this is one of the reasons why comic books are still around, actually, they're good advertising, but when comic book movies do well, there are surges in comic book sales a lot of the time. It really depends on if the movie is good. If it does well and it sucks, which can happen, I highly doubt there is. But in general, these movies do actually get some percentage of people to go to the comic book store. Now, that said, we are in an economy in 2025 that's not very good for the average person. It might be good for certain investors. It might be good for certain people at the top. People push GDP and growth and all this stuff. But average people like you and me that are maybe making minimum wage or maybe making above that but not super comfortable, we're not rushing to buy comic books anyway. And the reason isn't because there's no correlation between popularity and the game. The reason is because these comic books are too damn expensive. You get way too little with them. They are often, well, they're pretty much always cliffhangers, but they're often frustrating for readers, especially ones who've been around. I mean, like, let's think about just Spider-Man. It's just my go-to example. Spider-Man in recent years has been absolutely rough. You might as well call it the cucking of Peter Parker and the absolute destruction of Ben Reilly. And that could be like a novel. You could write a novel on what's happened with these characters. Two of my favorite characters of all time. Peter Parker has gone through hell, not because it's interesting like his past, but just because it's something that they can do to push people to buy comic books because they're mad and frustrated and want it to change. We had all this stuff with Paul, which if you don't know about, I've made like 2 videos on, where essentially this guy who's a mass genocide supporter from another dimension whose dad murdered the entire world and he helped with, ended up banging MJ, and they had fake kids together. This is the stupidest thing ever. And then their fake kids went away, but they're still together. And there's almost like a mandate around this weird self-insert character, which I still am unsure where it comes from. I've heard some people say it has to do with Zeb Wells' divorce. I don't know that. I'm not claiming that, but there were a lot of people saying, oh, that's why the character was written this way, to like come into Peter's life and take, the woman in his life from him because, Zeb Wells went through this terrible situation with his divorce. I've seen a lot of people speculate that. I don't know that. It's possible. And these people, authors often do put a piece of themselves in their work. So who knows? But in general, no matter who's at fault, whether it's Wells with his writing, whether it's editorial mandates, which we know essentially prevent Peter Parker and MJ from getting married again, which also I do believe affected the Nick Spencer run of Amazing Spider-Man, because he was building back towards the Mephisto payoff. He was building back towards Peter having a daughter, all this stuff. Long story short, Spider-Man comics have been a nightmare, and then they had the balls to revive Ben Reilly a while back, do almost nothing with him, except for a pretty good flashback series, that was good, and then turn him into a villain, and then turn him into a dumber version of the same villain, couldn't even keep him cool, and then ditch him. You know, like, these are Spider-Man characters. Some of the cool characters they have introduced have just kind of gone off the page and disappeared completely, and this is an example of a really popular character who still often sells just because it's Spider-Man. Now, the Ultimate Spider-Man comic books are amazing, and they do very well, and actually, there were comments officially that they were outselling Amazing Spider-Man by a little bit, which is great. It's an older Peter Parker, you know, a more balanced character, I would say, with a family. He's married to Mary Jane Watson. That's not a sticking point for me, by the way. It doesn't even need to be Mary Jane in Amazing. It's just like, you need to give him some stability. This man's an adult. Just constantly putting him through the ringer just because is bad writing. But regardless, you know, like, that's a family-driven book. Kind of like Superman, where you have Superman, Lois Lane, Jonathan, you know, sometimes you have Krypto. Essentially, you have, like, the Superman family. That's kind of what Ultimate Spider-Man is doing, and luckily it's selling very well because it listened to what audiences wanted to see, and Jonathan Hickman wrote it extremely well. My point is, when comic books are good, often people do show up. So if you're not seeing a correlation between sales and these characters being popular, maybe part of it is that these comic books are too expensive. Maybe part of it is that you're pricing people out of it by pushing variant cover collecting instead of actually pushing your narrative. Maybe part of it is that you don't listen to what people want to read. I'm not saying everything has to be by committee, but there is a point at which when everybody's hating what you're doing, maybe what you're doing isn't good. It's worth addressing. It's worth looking at. Maybe part of it also is that people just don't have money in general, and they're playing a free game, you know, and like, this is a bad time in our economy, in the world, but especially in America, I would argue, for average everyday people. Cost of living goes up, and income really doesn't to match it. I don't buy that the reason for this is just because people are interested in the gameplay mechanics. I don't buy that. That to me seems like a very, very flawed view of why Marvel Rivals is popular. Is that part of it? Yes. If it was a sucky game, if the game sucked, but it had this vibe and this style to it, it would not be nearly as popular. I absolutely agree. That is a huge part of a video game. But another huge part of the video game is these characters. People making memes about Venom and his ass and doing twerking. People logging in to play your events because they want some random skin for Mantis, because they like Mantis. Not because they need the skin for gameplay, but because they enjoy Mantis, you know? What's weird to me about all of this, to kind of wrap it up, is Marvel Comics understood this when it came to the MCU. I disagree with some changes, but when it came to the MCU, they understood that in order to have this brand synergy, they wanted to change certain characters and certain ideas to be more like the MCU to draw in movie fans, right? They weren't doing as good as they thought they could. In fact, this company's been on the verge of bankruptcy multiple times over the years. And so they wanted to bring in movie fans that maybe went and watched a film. And so what they would do is they'd have some kind of brand synergy where they'd make that character a little bit more like the films so that people could get into it. They'd have a jumping in starting point. I think there's several problems with what they're doing with Marvel Rivals. First off, the comic books for Marvel Rivals are few and far between. There's only a couple of them. It's like a limited series thing. Very little actually tying into Marvel Rivals. So that's already a first point. The second point is the pricing. I already talked about that. The third point is that a lot of people don't go to comic book shops because of the stigma around them, which is something that I think is unfortunate, where people think it's just people like the comic book guy from Simpsons or Millhouse, or a bunch of virgins not by choice arguing with each other about characters and smelling bad. Like, there is a bad stigma around that. You have to do what you did with the MCU, which, even though it's heavily criticized, I would argue, in quotations, made the characters cool for mainstream audiences. That's what Marvel Rivals is doing. They're drawing in people who never had an interest in comic books. They're drawing in people who never had an interest in Squirrel Girl, who didn't have any idea who the hell that was. They're drawing in people who would never care about someone like Jeff the Shark, but now they do. And not just because of how he plays, but because he's interesting. They're drawing in people who see Emma Frost and they think, ooh, big tall mommy. You know, and maybe didn't know who Emma Frost was, didn't have any idea about it. I'd argue most people had no idea who Galacta was before this. My point is, this is doing a very good job of getting people to notice your characters, getting people to see that they're here, getting people to find them interesting. And instead of capitalizing off of that in an intelligent way, the answer seems to be we're going to ignore it. And I just don't understand. Like, I don't do that well financially. Maybe I'm not one to talk. I'm not rich. I don't run a company. But if all of a sudden something was blowing up, like a character that I made, you can bet I'd be trying to do more with that character. You can bet I'd be trying to get that character out there. I'd be trying to not milk it badly, but write good stories or do something good around that character that people could rally behind and enjoy. And enjoy together. That's what comic books were supposed to be. Like, yeah, you read it alone a lot of times, but like then you talk about it. It's like, no way, you know, Incredible Hulk couldn't beat that guy. Oh yeah, well, Venom definitely could take down Toxin by himself. No, he couldn't. That's kind of what comic books were supposed to be, was this collaborative, fun fandom. And over the years, it's just become this expensive, toxic, annoying, preaching pulpit in a lot of ways, where authors will get on Twitter and yell at you. People will get on Twitter or in DMs and threaten authors. Executive editors won't listen to what the money is saying even. Like, the money around this game is crazy too, not just the player count. The money. Look at all the premium skins that you see when you go in matches. People are buying stuff. They're interested. Why not take a cue from that? I just don't understand. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I am interested to hear your thoughts on it. If you enjoyed this video, you want to leave a like, subscribe, I appreciate that very much. I've applied to the Marvel Rivals, program, the affiliate program several times. For some reason, they've never accepted me, so I don't have anything for that. But I will say I do have a Fortnite code, which is DJAY123. So if you're interested in that, that goes to help support our channel every month. Always very helpful, appreciate it. You guys are really helpful with that, and it means a lot to me. I'll try to make another video on that game soon. And also, as well, we do have our own store, CosmoBunny.shop. Now, we're currently a little bit overstocked, so we're actually going to be doing a bit of a sale on there, which I do think you should check out. That's going to be starting, I believe, today, around the time this goes up. No, normally we'd do 10% off your entire order, but we are actually cranking that up to 15% off your entire order if you use the code SALE. That is S-A-L-E, not to be confused with SALE, baby. Not that one. An actual sale, like a garage sale. So, interested to see you down below. Hope you check that out. Have a fantastic day. The sale is only going to last for about a week, so please check it out while you can. As always, everyone, stay shway.